Hello and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Abush. With me as always is Phil McKenzie.
Hello.
That was pretty good. I got 1.5 syllables there.
Getting there.
It's a great sign for today's episode. I don't know why I'm already sounding sarcastic. I guess that's just in my nature. But I mean it. We do have some good stuff to talk about. We were definitely looking forward to last week's main event, Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett, and one of those that did not deliver entirely on like the back and forth double-edged action we were expecting, but more than exceeded our expectations, I imagine. I haven't asked you yet, Phil, but I'm going to assume you were also very impressed with Ilia Topuria.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not be?
Exactly. Truly a star-making, a contender-making kind of performance from Ilia Topuria. Definitely the best showing of his, I'm going to say, entire MMA career against the most dangerous guy he's ever fought. So a lot to talk about regarding that. There were some other interesting gems from this undercard, which we will get to later in the show, namely Macy Barber versus Amanda Hebush. I thought Brendan Allen had an interesting showing against Bruno Silva. And then called out Jared Cannonier, which, given our praise for Jared Cannonier on last week's episode, we may have some things to say about that potential matchup. In segment 2, we are going to talk about next week's main event. And maybe that is where the note of cynicism was already creeping into my words, because I don't understand this main event. I don't get it. Clearly the matchmakers are extremely taken with Abusupian Magomedov. Or as I guess they just call him, Abus. Maybe it's just the name. Maybe it's the record. I mean, the guy is clearly a good fighter by middleweight standards, whatever that means. But I have to say, until this week when I watched basically every one of his fights I could find, which isn't too hard because most of them are very short, I had no idea who Abus Magomedov was. So, not a great sign in my book for a main event. Nonetheless, we are going to discuss it because it is next week's main event. I forgot the bit I was going to do, Phil. I was going to start this episode acting all excited that we were about to preview Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. Thanks to that bit of false hope you gave me at the end of last week's show.
I'm sorry, the months sound very similar.
Could be January, could be July, could be June. You know, what's the difference?
One of them.
Yeah.
It's happening at some point, maybe.
Yeah, they all start with a J, they all end in a vowel.
Disappointment.
Or at least a sometimes vowel. But yeah, we don't have Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence. That's a good thing anyway. I mean, it gives us more time. Well, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure it coincides with the banger UFC card. One of the few. So we'll have to squeeze some things in there, but we're going to try to get Kyle or maybe Ryan Wagner or one of the other boxing heads online that we know to break that one down. That's something to look forward to. Something to think about, perhaps, when we get to segment 2 of today's episode. It's good when the host advises you to just not listen and just think about something more interesting. Anyway, we're talking about Ilia Topuria first. And, Phil, take it away. As I said, star-making performance. What was so impressive to you about the man from Georgia?
I mean, this was just like a super controlled performance, I think is the main thing.
Yeah.
Because Topuria has always had moments or even like extended periods of looking fantastic on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's often kind of gotten bored or mad or something, and he's just thrown it away and started like rushing his opponent and trying to kill them. And it was a fairly good assumption that he would try that at some point in this fight against the immensely dangerous Josh Emmett. He just didn't. He just had like a super focused, super disciplined, performance where he just built off the jab, mostly like behind his shoulder, like Dustin Poirier, to get out of the way of stuff, and just kind of fainted and outworked Emmett kind of out of his pants. Like, he just... I mean, this... I would not have... would have said, like, Topuria had knocked Emmett out. I would have been like, sure, that's fine. You know, I could see that happening. Likewise, you know, Topuria getting mad and getting KO'd by Emmett. A back and forth war. Sure, this all kind of things I would not be that surprised by. In some ways, this is the best possible outcome. This is him putting on a hyper-disciplined, star-making performance and an absolute shutout over 5 rounds.
Yeah, a shutout, and sort of like we talked about this on the bonus last week, a week after it happened, in fact. The Dan Ige fight against Nate Landwehr, and I said this was like... I had that fight 30-27. I thought Dan Ige won every round. I thought he looked phenomenal, but Nate Landwehr made for an excellent foil for that kind of performance. It wasn't like my touchstone of like Whittaker Gastelum. It was like somebody who was trying their ass off and making the fighter who was in control fight at every moment to keep that control. This was very much that kind of thing, because Josh Emmett, he tried his damnedest, dude. He did not go away. He was making every conceivable effort to try to change the momentum of this fight, and it was just useless. We hoped for this. I mean, we expressed that last week, right? We're like, if Ilia Topuria has some more control in him, we know he's capable technically of putting on this kind of performance, but we didn't trust him to do it. And I find that extremely, satisfying to see that, like, to an extent, this sort of confirms that Ilia Topuria has probably been getting wild because he thinks he can get away with it. Against lesser opponents, he took Josh Emmett very seriously, and that came through in the performance, even to the extent that there was some hairiness right at the beginning, like the first 3-4 minutes before he had kind of boxed Emmett out of the fight. And I thought you could see that these were calculated risks. Topuria was like, he accepted some exchanges. He was hanging out in the pocket with a very dangerous puncher while he was still at his fastest, but he wasn't pushing it and getting wild. He was sort of, these were strategic risks, but he wasn't in there making big, wild tactical mistakes, you know? And, I think it paid off. I mean, I think he demanded Josh Emmett's respect. He was like, you can throw 4 punches at me and I'm going to be there in the pocket at the end, ready to fire back. And that allowed him to kind of continue building and slow cooking him for the rest of the fight. Other than that, I mean, with very few exceptions, this was like moment to moment a perfect fight from Ilia Topuria. Like, perfect.
Yeah, I think just Josh Emmett just simply couldn't find his way like back into this fight, no matter how much he tried.
Yeah.
And you know, it also just displays again, like, in some ways, why you still find Josh Emmett an annoying fighter to watch, because he's so gifted. You know, he's incredibly mentally tough. You can tell from this performance.
Yeah.
He could keep going. He's physically tough. He could keep going after, you know, he had one of his best rounds in the 5th. Despite the fact that he'd been absolutely torn to pieces before that.
Yeah.
It's just the idea that, like, everything comes from this giant, like, squat base.
Yeah.
It'll be completely random as to, you know, which foot moves before he has to throw. You know, he won't, like, keep his front foot. He won't move his back foot first. He's moving backwards. He'll just, like, everything is about talking as much momentum as possible,
Yeah.
like over his hips to throw a giant right hand, and then shifting it all over to the left, and then throwing a huge left hand from that. Just these massive wading, like
Purely athletic striking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of those gifts were kind of tunneled into finding a way to make that work. And
yeah,
I mean, Topuria was just able to feint and jab his way in until, the wind-up of what Emmett was going for just became incredibly telegraphed. Emmett was just incapable of even thinking about engaging in a lead hand war with Topuria.
Yeah.
Because I think on maybe the one or two occasions he actually committed to a lead hand strike, wasn't just a feint for the right hand. He actually, he hurt Topuria. He knocked him down, I think, in round 2, when Topuria did get a little bit wild and pushed him up against the fence. But yeah, I mean, has a dynamite counter left hook, but was almost never in play because he's only able to use it when his opponent is his stance is so flat and so broad that he's only able to use that kind of talking motion when his opponent is right in front of him.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's all about just the wind up for the giant giant overswing.
Yeah. Certainly the left hook was the thing I was most concerned about for Topuria's sake throughout this fight. I think it's probably Josh Emmett's best punch. It's his most surprising punch. And but even that was, it was mostly effective on the follow-up, and it was catching Topuria a few times when he was trying to hide behind his shoulder. A sort of classic position to find yourself surprised by a left hook when you're turned side on and trying to glide underneath the right hand. But as far as educated lead hand work, yeah, the contrast could not have been more severe. And in terms of footwork, the footwork that made Topuria's excellent lead hand work possible, the contrast could not have been more severe. Now, I did think Josh Emmett, he made some good decisions with the footwork. At least as far as anti-cage cutting. Certainly I was impressed by it as the fight went on, and I couldn't believe that he was still on his feet. But he did a good job cutting back, trying to bait Topuria into an overcommitment, and he seized on moments that weren't Topuria didn't overcommit on many strikes, if any. But he was looking for him to overcommit with the footwork, right? This is what you do is you move to the right, you move back to the left, you get them chasing you, or you get them trying to cut you off, and you see them take that extra large step where they're momentarily out of position, and that's when you run them into the shot. And Josh Emmett did that a few times. I thought that was, a good idea, well executed. But he did not have any of the subtleties of just good boxing. Topuria was so patient. Almost every single step he took was very small. Which is why those tactics didn't work for Emmett more often. And why his jab was so difficult to deal with. Because Topuria was not jabbing to leap across space and land something. He was in range more often than not before he jabbed. Many of these were not even stepping jabs. Or if there was a step, it was very small and just to add a little pop to the punch. He would just sidle up very patiently, keeping his stance perfectly balanced, chasing that little angle, trying to get around Josh Emmett's lead foot, and then just stab him in the face. And it was all because of the small steps that he was willing to take, that he was so methodical at just getting to the right range and then not trying to do too much with it when he had it. Just carefully take Josh Emmett apart at the joints.
Yeah. And yeah, it also just meant that so one of the things that was going on was that Emmett was going back to his corner and they were saying, basically, you got to get in the pocket with this guy. He can't hang with you in the pocket. It was just like, my guys, this is just not true.
90% of the fight has been happening in the pocket, and he's been losing.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand.
They just wanted him to, they needed him to knock Topuria out, is what they were trying to say,
Yeah. I mean, there is a way in which this is true, in that, like, Topuria was still sort of mostly retreating on, a straight line, as MMA fighters do. And, it was simply the fact that he was mostly blocking the first punch and then was, like, out of the way of the second one.
Yeah, and that he was already at the right range.
Was going after him.
He was already at the right range, and he had no difficulty reading, as you said, Emmett's athletic but nonetheless cumbersome entries, having to just leap across space. Topuria's like, oh, you're coming forward. I start backing up a second before that becomes a problem.
Yeah. So I think, the mechanical reason for why they might want to be in the pocket is simply so that it would be easier for Emmett to catch him on the whilst he was running backwards. I think that was pretty much it. But other than that, it was the fact that, like, that kind of rowing, wading form that Emmett has just meant that, well, firstly, Topuria was getting the first word in the exchanges because he was initiating them with the jab. Secondly, if they went deep at all, it was just throwing himself out of position the whole time.
Yeah, 2 punches in, he's just open to everything.
It was when exchanges went like 3 or 4 punches deep, that was when Emmett was getting badly hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Topuria was then clearly able to recognize, like, this guy is standing, like, I am essentially at a 45-degree angle from him at this point, but I'm still directly lined up with him. There can be nothing coming back at me. And Topuria was just punching him as hard as he could.
Yeah.
Because he was basically still in position to.
Yeah. Yeah, Topuria's position is just fundamentally sound. Like, he doesn't lead with his head. He doesn't get his feet too far apart, so it's always very easy to take a small step in whatever direction he wants. He stays behind his jab and his lead shoulder, not to the extent he does when he's trying to, like, shoulder roll right hands, but in just a, I'm giving you a smaller target and I'm keeping this barrier in front of my chin kind of way. Again, this is fundamental boxing. Like, this is what positioning means in the actual sport of boxing, where people are, really good at this kind of thing. They understand it. And Topuria demonstrated, like, that level of understanding. I mean, I wouldn't even say that he backed up in straight lines more than many boxers I see. It's not like I don't ever watch boxing and I'm like, I would like to see some more pivots and some more tight lateral moves. But the thing is like, there's nothing wrong with retreating on a straight line. Distance is, in fact, a very good form of defense in and of itself. You just have to time that retreat correctly. You don't get too close and then try to backpedal when you're already in range. You look for that little twitch, as Topuria did, from the correct distance. And you'll note that when Topuria was engaged in one of these long exchanges, when he was fully in, like, middle distance or even closer, he didn't try any straight back retreats in those moments. That was when he started ducking and slipping and sidestepping around Emmett. It was only when he was at jab range that he correctly felt safe in just backpedaling when threatened. Because he just knew as long as he read it at the right moment, Emmett was going to have to work way harder to get to him than he would have to get out of the way. And just keep his hands tight, keep that shoulder in place while he's backpedaling. Good luck landing a clean shot on me and finishing me in these positions.
For sure.
And I just a tremendously controlled performance. Like, this is exactly what you want to see out of a super impressive prospect with this kind of step up in competition. Good strategic decision making. One thing I particularly enjoyed, especially because by this point I was so taken with Topuria's performance that I was just, like, calling what the right thing to do was, as if, like, I knew he was going to do it. And I was not proven wrong. He knew what to do. In the 5th round, as you were talking about, Emmett, he fucking went for it, you know? Full credit to Josh Emmett. His corner was like, I don't think I'm telling you any news. You need to knock this dude out. You have to go. That's all there is to do. And he came out, and for maybe the first minute and a half, almost 2 minutes, he was just trying to hunt Topuria down. All caution to the wind, just every ounce of power he had left. And in those moments, Topuria just let him do it. You know, did he get chased around some? Yeah. Did he get hit a couple times? Because that's what happens when a guy is just fully selling out trying to get to you. Yes. But he did not accept the proposition of a brawl. He did not think, I have to scare this guy off. He correctly understood, I have broken this man. You know, all but like the skeleton of who he is as a fighter has been stripped away. I'm just going to let him tire himself out for a minute. I'm just going to ride out these couple minutes, move around, use my footwork, and lo and behold, Josh Emmett slowed down and stopped going for it quite so hard, and then Topuria proceeded to win the rest of the round, even sealing it with, again, a strategically very wise takedown and top control sequence at the end. If that isn't the sign of a professional, legit fucking contender, I don't know what is. That is how you win a fight, man.
Yep. At 26, that is
incredible.
Yeah, that is how you announce yourself as a potential title challenger. Also, apparently, someone said that he learned boxing from watching Canelo YouTube videos with his brother.
Yeah, I've heard this multiple times that he is like a devout Canelo fan. Yeah. You could tell. Canelo is probably the most fundamentally sound boxer going today. They're just like, you know, there's like stylistic ways to work around Canelo, but like you would never look at him and critique the mechanics of his defense or his footwork, and certainly not his punching. He is like the cleanest puncher in the sport of boxing. Everything he does is like right out of a book. And yeah, you can tell. Topuria saw that and was like, I want to fight like that. I'm going to strive to be really good at boxing. I'm not going to try to cheat. I'm not going to try to take a bunch of shortcuts like Josh Emmett does. From day one, it appears that this guy has been learning how to box, the actual techniques and skills of boxing. And you tack that on to what is clearly an elite athlete already. Like, it's not like he's on Josh Emmett's tier as an athlete, I think, or close. He's strong, he's fast, he's powerful. This is why he can get away with just taking huge risks against lesser fighters. But, yeah, that's like Jose Aldo Volkanovski territory. When you take this kind of absurd next level athlete and yet they remain just a student of the game who wants to do everything correctly. And you get performances like this.
Remarkable. Also, I did very much like the little interaction between him and Merab afterwards.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Oh, it's just genuinely really sweet. I'm not sure why, but like Merab is like asking him questions like he's a member of the press, or like talking to him anyway. And like,
was he still wearing Sean O'Malley's jacket?
I don't think he is at the time. He must be wearing something else. But then he's just like, this guy will be champion. I spar with him, and he knocked me down 3 times. And Topuria is like, no, I know you two. You will be champion as well. You will be champion. And they're both just trying to like big each other up as much as possible. And then like,
that's right.
He's like, I know what this man has. He is I know what Merab has. He's gonna be champion. I know it. And then Merab's like, let me stop doing this now. This is your moment. Let me enjoy it. And Topuria is just like, brother, we will both have our moments soon. It was just genuinely super sweet to see two guys just gassing each other up like that.
Yeah. Cartvellians unite. Little Georgian brotherhood there. Hey, I respect the Georgians, man. You know they have like they have like one of the oldest languages on Earth.
Yeah, we talked about it once, right? It's
their own, you know.
It's got this completely like idiosyncratic script which doesn't look like anything else.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was developed for Georgian or one of its ancestor Kartvelian languages. And they're this little isolated language group that has been speaking their own way, as many Caucasian regions are, separated into their little valleys and whatnot. But Georgian has been around basically as long as like Armenian. So a very long fucking time. Very cool. A lot of good Georgian fighters. Both of them would pants Giga Chikadze. I think we can all agree.
100%.
Yeah, and I think the two of them together could probably beat, I'm forgetting his name. Who's the one I hate? Who I've kind of come to enjoy.
Dolidze.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Most certainly.
So anyway, actually, I just realized Tupuria doesn't have one of the two Georgian name suffixes. He's a weird one in my experience. Everyone's either a ze or a willy from Georgia,
that's a good point.
but not Tupuria. All right, well, we're getting well sidetracked by a little ethnography here. Anyway, Merab Dvalishvili correct to praise Ilya Tupuria and vice versa. As we've said multiple times, like just the man stepped up. I mean, what more can you say? Just a technically flawless, perfect strategic performance, betrayed like just a really mature understanding of how to win a fight. And it was not like it was boring. I don't think it could have been. Josh Emmett wouldn't allow it to be, but I don't think Tupuria would have been content with a completely boring performance himself. Like if he had been able to run Josh Emmett over, he very obviously would have. He was still taking calculated risks. He was pushing the pace the entire time. And that just was underscored by the fact that his lead felt extremely secure the entire time. He wasn't slipping up. He wasn't taking unnecessary risks. He was not engaging in any of the kinds of messier fights that would have actually given Josh Emmett a chance. So just a mature professional performance from Tupuria that was nonetheless plenty violent and exciting. So I'm very, very excited to see this guy continuing to put on shows like this. And
I mean, it was
yeah.
I mean, far from anything like a controlled performance, it was an utter thrashing. I mean, he got a 50-42 card.
Fair enough, you know?
I think that has to be, if not then maybe, is that tied with the most lopsided score there's ever been in UFC history?
I want to say, in fact, I saw something, one of the judges may have given him a 10-7.
That's one of the only 10-7s I can ever remember seeing.
And it was what, round 2 or 3, the one where he was just hurting 2 maybe? He was just hurting
round 4, I believe.
Oh, 4, okay. Whatever it was. It was just one big canvas that Tupuria was just painting on brilliantly the entire time.
I mean, there's other rounds I've seen which have been as bad or worse, but like, that didn't get 10-7s, but still, you can't say it's not justified. He was absolutely slaughtering him.
Yeah. Flawless performance. All right, well, let's take a break on that note and talk about something a little more flawed. Sean Strickland versus Abus Magomedov. That's coming up next week. As I said before, after that, in segment 3, we are going to dip back to the Tupuria Emmett undercard to talk about Macy Barber versus Amanda Hebesh and the rest. All of that after this. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We were not talking about video games. We were talking about this fight. That's how invested we are in it. It's Sean Strickland versus Abus Magomedov. That was not deliberate. I did forget for a moment.
I was thinking, like, that's a very convincing pause, Connor.
Yeah. Hand me my Emmy right now, please. Yeah. Sean Strickland, Abus Magomedov. We can go on and on about how, like, why is this happening? The whole why is it happening of it all. But I
mean, I gotta say,
uh-huh.
I will say, is Sean Strickland, is he like a minor star for the UFC now?
Yeah.
Has he become like one of those people where they've managed to become like a second tier or even third tier, like UFC star / mainstay?
Yeah, like a Cowboy level star.
Yeah, but like Cowboy did that. I mean, he's not Cowboy, but also Cowboy did that despite having the Budweiser and the Cowboy shtick and the extreme sports stuff. Cowboy was also like a reliably, sensationally exciting fighter.
Well, yeah.
Strickland does seem to be one of the ones who has sort of got there, and despite his fighting style rather than because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have always liked Sean Strickland. He's a weird fighter. It's not like he's never in fun fights. It's very much up to the opponent whether Sean Strickland's fights are entertaining or not. Certain matchups, because Sean Strickland is an IQ test fighter. You know exactly what you're going to get every single time. And it's a question of how does the opponent try to tangle with that. Sometimes it sucks ass. Sometimes it's a lot of fun. Frequently, it's just kind of mediocre in a way that I nonetheless enjoy, but which I could still recognize as being pretty banal.
Yeah, you are not describing someone who is like box office dynamite here, Connor.
Well, he's a middleweight. So that's his real advantage over Cowboy and why he gets main event bookings. He's bigger.
He is big, yes.
That's how it goes.
I think he's like Chael Sonnen or Holly Holm.
Yeah, Chael's a better comparison because Chael's fights often sucked ass too. But he was entertaining as a person. Sean Strickland is a very different kind of entertaining as a person, but he's undeniably a fascinating individual, shall we say.
So basically what I'm saying is we're going to get more of these.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Did you see Zane was sharing this with me last week, by the way. I think this was off the air, so I may as well talk about it now. There was something where Sean Strickland was asked by an interviewer, this is a classic, a penetrating MMA interview question. What kind of food do you like to eat? Whoa. Next they'll be asking this guy what his favorite color is. And what he said was, like burgers and, nothing gay like sushi or pizza. I could not contain myself when I read that.
It's tremendous.
This is a man who is so imprisoned by what is like the mere fact that it surrounds him is so completely just sort of reveals how fragile his masculinity is. Having pizza, the single most popular food in the world, is like cosmopolitan and gay. It's effete to eat pizza. So yeah, that's Sean Strickland in a nutshell right there. Of course, he would never eat nuts. That's kind of sus. But he's taking on some guy.
I'm just trying to think of like what era of masculinity is he pulling this parchment of pizza from. My guess is going to be the 1950s, which is when it really became popular. When the American soldiers came back from Europe.
Yeah, he doesn't suffer to eat any.
There must have just been a ton of people being like, what the hell is this you're eating, kind of thing.
Yeah, he doesn't suffer to eat any of that.
No son of mine, etc. and so forth.
You should be working in the mines, not eating this cosmopolitan city slicker Italian cuisine. Yeah. So that's Sean Strickland's version of masculinity. He's, can I just say, I mean, this is what we're going to do. We're already, you know, I said we weren't going to do it. Can you blame us? We're shitting on the card. But, you know, Jack Slack, lovely man, also likes to shit on the UFC. He keeps it real. He'll shit on any fights. I mean, the man, you know, he watches a broader range of fights than we do. So he has opportunities to shit on every promotion and everything imaginable. Anyway, he was shitting on the UFC for tweeting, "The month of July is looking," and then they did a full 3 fire emojis. And the image was of the 4 posters of this month's events. One of which is good. And one of which is this. And another of which has a Holly Holm main event. Speaking of the Sean Strickland enigma, of retaining minor stardom, Holly Holm is a bigger star than Sean Strickland with a significantly less interesting fighting style. And the number of people I saw, like, stridently defending Holly Holm while demonstrating literally like zero understanding of what her fights looked like was shocking. That they're like, well, you know, Holly's great. I mean, she always shows up to people just describing different fighters and attaching Holly Holm's name to it to justify why they thought it was a great main event. This is like something from the Underground and the Sherdog days, but I'm going to bring it back. I think we have some legitimate UFC shills out there on social media. I think we honestly probably have like sock puppet accounts. I cannot fucking countenance that there are real people out there so deluded as to think that when they watch a Holly Holm fight, they're loving it the whole time. There's no way. Is there?
Yeah, no, I think there is. I'm sorry. I'll still say it. People were cheering.
That's true. The crowd still cheers, and
I'm never like that's always going to be one of the things that will stick with me watching MMA.
As
in
usual,
fact, in general, like that has always been that is like an important life lesson for me.
Yeah,
it's that like you just never know what people are thinking, what people are enjoying.
Other people
There's some sick fucks out there.
Not the same as me. Yeah, that's true. As usual, I tried to find solace in sort of conspiratorial thinking. Because
people do.
The crushing truth of the world is that it actually doesn't make sense, but people really do like Holly Holm fights.
Yeah, or they're just like not watching them from a fight entertainment perspective. They're just like,
then what are they watching?
Somehow seeing her and just willing her to win, and then she is doing it, and then somehow, and it's by pushing the other person against the fence, and they're like, yes, this is happening. I am pleased. Go, Holly. Sure.
Anyway, let's actually talk about this. Abusupian Magomedov has been signed to the UFC for some time now. He had one fight against the thoroughly unimpressive Dustin Stoltzfus, about on par with most of his pre-UFC opponents, in my experience. And, you know, summarily crushed him in like 20 seconds. And then he's had 5 other bookings, all canceled since then. Obviously a promising pick for a main event slot. Not somebody who is perhaps, you know, a suggestion of like a curse on the UFC matchmakers or anything like that. No. Spit in the face of God. Put him in a main event.
This has never gone wrong before. No.
Jeremy Stevens is fighting tonight.
Yeah, just continue to put like Alex Perez or whatever, or who was the other, like Ray Borg. It's like people who are obviously snake bitten to an extreme extent. Just put them in main events, or just like key fights that are vital to the like continuing health of the division. Just do that shit.
Well, you see, Phil, it's because this is why the UFC stacks their undercards. Right? The undercard is stacked so that if a main event happens to fall through, it's no great loss. Now let me take a sip of my iced coffee and take a quick look at this undercard. I'm not actually going to do a spit take, but it sucks. But yeah, he's just a guy. I mean, he's athletic, you know, he's fast, he's powerful, and he's big. And for the majority of his run, of his career, rather, he has been insulated by that size. I think that's pretty clear. because he's very one and done. And also just insulated by like the sort of weird stylistic flaws that pervade the UFC division that are really, if anything, on a par, but often worse than the sort of fatal flaws we see among UFC middleweights. Just fighting guys who have weird, nonsensical games, like borderline heavyweight tier depth of skill, that just kind of let him have his way. And some of this is genuinely because Magomedov is a big, threatening, dangerous fighter. Some of it is because his opponents just are not generally that good. And so the question is, now that he's fighting a guy who has size parity and a, at times, mind-numbingly consistent process to his game, will Abus Magomedov get to enjoy the same kind of success he has against most other opponents? And if not, what does that look like? If he can't just push Strickland around on the end of his reach, if he can't just throw one kick at a time and just sort of march him down and then every once in a while dive in with a ludicrously reckless series of flailing hooks that have him headbutting the fence when they miss, then what does that fight look like? And I gotta think it's not one he wins.
Yeah, I think he's basically on the same kind of, has the same kind of general build to his game as Nassourdine Imavov in one way, or who's the
There's a bit of the worst sides of Kevin Holland in there.
Mm-hmm. Who's what's his face? The Armenian kid recently lost to Fluffy.
The Armenian kid recently lost to Fluffy.
To Anthony Hernandez.
Yeah, I know Anthony Hernandez. I'm sure as soon as I see this man's name, I will think of it.
Shabazian.
Oh. Yeah. No, he's not nearly as good as Shabazian.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not as good as, he doesn't look as good as Nassourdine Imavov either. But in all these cases, these are clearly like quite potent, offensively potent fighters.
Yeah.
Who are built around the idea that singular moments of offense are going to be like enough.
Yeah.
With Shabazian, he's basically relying on the fact that you're going to get finished in round one.
Right.
With Imavov, he's relying that you're going to get scared off.
Yeah.
And honestly, at the moment, Magomedov looks, you kind of said, well, as I also agreed with, like, he looks kind of worse than both of them.
Yeah.
And built with, like Shabazian, it has the advantage of being very potent and having some like level of technical skill.
He's quite technical. He just has
quite. Sorry, what's that?
No, I was saying Shabazian's quite technical, but he has a fatal sort of character flaw.
There's also like he's fairly well contained, but yeah, you can clearly just tell that he could get overwhelmed before he fought Strickland,
right?
And that he just can't fight at a high enough pace. Magomedov looks like the worst traits of both of them, in that he doesn't have a game that can win rounds by slowly passing out offense that the opponent gets scared of, like Imavov does. And he doesn't look, I mean, he might be, because he finished his last fight almost immediately. He doesn't look like he can just wipe people off the face of the map instantly like Shabazian. But even if he could, would I expect him to be able to do that to Sean Strickland?
Yeah,
Does he look like he's Alex Pereira?
No.
He does not.
No, he is quite dangerous. He also reminds me of, God, this is just going to be us just thinking of names of other middleweights. Is there a guy named Umalatov, maybe? Am I completely inventing that name in my head?
Oh, that is someone. Ghassan Umalatov?
Who is it?
Ghassan Umalatov, or...
Maybe? I think there's another middleweight or welterweight who's like a big, lanky weirdo. I'm forgetting his name. There's a U in there somewhere. The thing is he is super dangerous. I mean, I think in part like Kevin Holland, because when he throws at people's heads, he just completely sells out. And this overwhelms a lot of opponents who are already threatened by his size. I think the power comes more from, the speed and that reckless commitment to landing with full power. That's what the effect, where the effect of those shots comes from. Process-wise, I would agree. He's worse than, I mean, it's, you know what I'm saying with Shabazian. Shabazian's process is broken, but until it breaks, it looks great, you know? Imavov, I think is honestly a little more clever in how he sets up his shots and a little more attentive to like what openings are actually being presented. Let's actually break down Magomedov's game from what we can see, right? Like he is mostly a striker, but he is absolutely willing to wrestle and get on top of people. He's, with that weird lanky frame, he's pretty scary getting on top of people, good back taker, good at keeping the mount. But in his grappling, as in his striking, he is prone to just wildly overcommitting without any provocation from the opponent. It is baked into his game. In the grappling, this manifests itself in like giving up position to drop for a triangle or a Kimura and just slipping off and losing position. He is not immune to getting swept. Because he will just, he's not a strategic thinker, there's no strategy baked into his game. As you said, it's sort of like he's just going to find the finish as it appears to him. And he hunts for finishes. I mean, that is why he has gotten so many quick finishes. That's what he's in there trying to do. So credit to him for that. But on the ground, these are very reckless, pursuits. And on the feet, he's a good kicker. That takes full advantage of his reach, very long legs, and reasonably varied. He likes his front kicks, he likes his high kicks, he likes his low kicks. When he punches, there is nothing resembling what you would expect from a rangy fighter. He literally just flies forward, just lunging off balance, left, right, huge, wild hooks, and the speed and the commitment, again, surprises people and makes these shots effective when they land. But there are way better ways to respond to that than what the vast majority of his opponents up to this point have done, which is to kind of cower and run along the perimeter of the fence and just let it look like he's bossing them around. Defensively, he's no great shakes at all. In fact, I would say he's quite poor defensively. He got knocked out.
Who else he reminds me a little bit of?
Who's that?
Nikita Krylov.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
A pretty dexterous kicking game, and then just like wild punches and and a probably too aggressive for his own good ground game.
Yeah,
but without Krylov's kind of pace for his division.
Yeah, that sounds like a very strong comparison. And even there, Krylov's process makes more sense, right? Because he pushes a super intense pace that works most of the time against other light heavyweights. And like, when Abus got knocked out by Lewis Taylor in his PFL championship fight, he did exactly what I was saying, praising Ilia Topuria for not doing before. Because he also flies back in straight lines. As with his offense, he has the classic MMA fighter flaw of overcommitting to his defense as well. Just massive, huge movements that he can't adjust mid-move. And he just got into range. Lewis Taylor came at him, and he just tried to leap back when he was already too close and got caught with a left hook on the way out, which is what happens when you don't diligently ensure that you're only retreating in straight lines when you're already at the right distance. So I just think he's physically impressive, and there's not much else. And I think to pick him in a matchup like this, two things would have to happen. He would have to knock Sean Strickland out. Possible, but doesn't happen very often. Generally, they are massive, massive punchers that hurt Sean Strickland. I don't know if he's that kind of puncher. The other thing would be to take advantage of the fact that Strickland is sometimes is in fact always susceptible to low kicks. He has that weird square stance. He just kind of hobbles forward, flat on his feet, doesn't check at all. Doesn't check until 30 kicks have already landed. But to expect that to be a route to victory in a 5-round fight, I would have to have seen that Magomedov knows how to stick to an approach. And I don't think he has that. I think he just tries stuff the whole time. And I think he is as likely to have a good idea fall out of his head as he is to suddenly hit upon another good idea. And to pick him to beat Sean Strickland with like a tried of weapons, I would have to trust him to consistently, diligently break Sean Strickland down. And I just don't think he's that kind of fighter. I have not seen that level of maturity in his performances. He's just going to go in there and try to do the big thing that wins the fight every round, and will probably get tired before the end doing that.
Hmm.
So how do you not pick Sean Strickland, right?
I mean, he's a powerful, dexterous kicker. I was like, I'm never picking Uriah Hall over Sean Strickland. What, are you kidding?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's just a fact that Sean Strickland, you know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to stand at the end of his range, and he's going to throw lots of, 50%, 60%, 40% power shots. And he's just going to stay there, and he's going to continue doing that. 5 rounds.
Yep.
There's nothing that says to me that this guy can hang with Sean Strickland doing that. Again, he's fairly young, right? It's possible that he could improve suddenly overnight, but
he's 32.
Okay, he isn't actually very young.
32 and 30 fights into his career. I think this is probably what we get.
Yeah. So, I mean, unless he just gets like a super weird mean kick KO almost immediately, he's just going to be stuck in a situation where his, shoddy boxing form, the fact that he wants to fight one strike at a time, and so on, he's going to get drowned. He doesn't even have the technical base. Like, we said this would happen to Imavov, and it kind of did.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the technical base of Imavov. He's just not as sharp as him.
Yeah, I mean, I can also envision him catching Sean Strickland by surprise with a punch. I don't think that's at all impossible. Strickland obviously is not a fighter who puts himself in good defensive positions. We've said countless times how much he relies on his ability to see things coming. And Magomedov does often find success landing the second punch in one of his usually at most 2-punch blitzes, but this is his idea of how to pressure people and catch them when they're moving along the fence, right? Is that he just whips a hook in from either direction while lunging straight forward. And if Sean Strickland makes one of his weird defensive moves, seeing the first punch, he absolutely might get caught by the second one. That kind of thing happens to Sean, because he starts in a bad defensive position and he makes a bad defensive move, to protect himself. It's just that he does those things at the right time because he usually sees stuff coming. But make no mistake, Sean Strickland's game is full of defensive liabilities. The other thing I'm interested in just before we close this out is whether Magomedov will get to pressure at all. Because Sean Strickland is not
I don't think so.
Sean Strickland isn't always committed to pressuring. If somebody insists on it, he will let them come forward for long stretches. Then again, I haven't really seen Abus against somebody who tries to pressure him. This is the weird thing about all these regional European fights he's in. They all I just think they're just intimidated by him. They just let him come forward. And it's so clear watching these fights that if you put this man on the back foot, his game collapses. He doesn't have a jab. He doesn't have footwork to move around and be evasive, and he needs his kicking. He needs to fly forward at people. He almost reminds me of yet another comparison, and this one even more insulting than all the others. of like Sergey Kovalev. Kovalev, obviously a very high level fighter, but he was always a guy who needed to run you down, right? He wanted that forward momentum to blitz you back and would frequently get you to the corner or get you to the ropes and then reset and let you off so that he could like avalanche combination you again. And Kovalev had some footwork and had a jab. So like he could absolutely survive and still do good work when he wasn't getting to chase you. I don't see any of those backup skills in Magomedov's arsenal. I think he either gets to walk after you and periodically try to run you down, meanwhile stabbing you with kicks, or you put him on the back foot, and what are his options? I just don't know. I hope we get surprised by him, because it looks like an incredibly uninspired main event pick by the UFC.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because you haven't seen him fight anyone really particularly any good. It's very hard to say how well does he respond to someone who is good. But yeah, everything about the construction of his game, like you said, makes him look like he's going to fall to pieces.
Yeah.
Once Strickland is in Strickland's range and doing Strickland's things.
Yeah.
And once that happens, Strickland is very much not the guy to go away from what is working.
No, he won't go away from it even when it isn't working that well. He doesn't go away from shit, except pizza parlors.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, he's not gay.
Man.
Yeah. I'm assuming like you that Strickland will probably one way or the other find himself pressuring, and that's just letting Strickland walk you down. It's not a good approach for even much better fighters than Magomedov, much better technicians, because he is undeterrable in that mode. So anyway, that's your main event. There are a couple of other highlights. In fact, I would say the next two fights down are both more interesting to me. There's Max Griffin versus Michael Morales, a hyper-athletic, hyper-underskilled prospect, versus a good athlete who is at this point a very savvy veteran. I think that is a super interesting prospect test for Morales. And I also like Damir Ismagulov versus Grant Dawson. Of course, a little worrying that Ismagulov, I think, has already tried to retire and is now back and hasn't been looking as motivated. But seeing him against a big, clumsy grappler who gasses when he doesn't get to out-wrestle people the whole time, that sounds like, a pretty entertaining sort of lineup. And that's it. Ismail Bonfim is back on this card, but he's not in a fight that we particularly care about.
Yeah, there's as I was saying before before we started recording, there's like 4 lightweight or lightweight adjacent fighters on this card that you could like throw in mixtures, like with Ismagulov, Bonfim, Kevin Lee, who was admittedly now welterweight and is never going back, but still. Kutadladze, and any of those guys fighting each other, I'd be like, yes, let's go. Instead, they're all just fighting guys. In one way or another. Ismagulov is fighting has the least guy opponent. Bonfim, Benoit Saint-Denis should be a banger. But yeah, there are 4 very compelling fighters on here, and none of them are matched up against each other.
Yep. Yeah, Kevin Lee's back. Carol Hosa, I still have some morbid curiosity watching her just inexplicably get slightly worse with each fight. She's taking on Yana Santos. That'll probably suck. Yeah, it is what it is. This is a UFC Apex card.
Unfortunately, I really like both of them as sort of people and their journey and that kind of stuff, but both Yana and now Thiago are dreadful to watch in almost all their fights.
Very true. Yeah, she's as boring as Holly Holm and not nearly as good. Okay, well, that'll do it. Fortunately, next week we have an absolute banger card that will probably warrant a bonus episode to try to cover everything. So this will all be over soon, and this segment is officially over. When we come back, Macy Barber, Amanda Hebush, Brendan Allen, Bruno Silva, and whatever else we decide to mention from last week's quite entertaining card in just a bit. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Macy Barber, Amanda Hebush was the co-main event, a fight we were looking forward to, a fight that certainly delivered. Absolutely entertaining, really the best version of this fight that it could possibly be, although I have to say, before we get into what played out, Phil, I don't think I enjoyed anything about this fight more than Dominic Cruz just nakedly trolling Daniel Cormier on commentary. I don't usually enjoy Dominic Cruz on commentary, but I could hear the impish grin in his voice as each time there was a head and arm throw executed, he was trying to get Daniel to explain why it was bad, and Daniel was very charmingly trying not to say, none of these women can wrestle.
In all fairness, this was a very good card for Dominic Cruz commentary, because not only did we,
That's right.
get this, but we also got the cauliflower ear is armor for your head.
Yeah, cauliflower ear. It's for people who don't know, it's a swelling of the ear to protect our brains. And Daniel saying, is that what it is? More earnestly than that, Daniel wasn't even skeptical. This was the side of Daniel Cormier that thinks Joe Rogan is a very smart man. Just gets told something he's never heard before and is like, well, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt. That's probably true. I can't help it. I love Daniel Cormier. I think he's a very nice man. I genuinely really like him on commentary when it comes to wrestling. He's truly very insightful in the way that I think Joe Rogan used to be, for the uninitiated in jiu-jitsu, and rarely gets to talk about that anymore or seems to care in that way anymore. I imagine DC is a very good wrestling coach because he is clearly a student of the game who still to this day finds the craft of wrestling fascinating to talk about. But I found that very charming and funny that he was like, these head and arm throws, they're not good. And Dominic was like, well, they work. And Dominic even said they work in junior high wrestling. Daniel was really trying not to explain why they might work so often in women's MMA. Let's be real. The fact of the matter is most women in MMA did not wrestle in school. And most people get their wrestling experience, if they come into MMA with it already, they get it from scholastic wrestling, high school and college programs. And there just aren't as many of those for women, and not as many women do them. And so it's not nothing to blame the women that subpar techniques work more often. There is just genuinely a lower level of wrestling skill that most women in MMA have. And you can see when, like a woman who does have a serious wrestling background takes on one of these other people, you can see the gulf, right? You can see when Carla Esparza wrestles somebody. Even then, head and arm throws, a viable technique, just high risk, high reward kind of thing.
It's one of those things where, like, it's not just that the women themselves do not have the technical background, but also that the people they are sparring with also aren't generally going to have the technical background either.
Right. We will see the head and arm throw, I think, fade away as women's MMA continues to develop, because it works too often for people not to be approaching their like male training partners and being like, how come this never happens to you? And in the aggregate, these ladies will learn. Anyway, this fight was not defined by head and arm throws. It was defined by violence. It was an extremely violent fight, and I could see all of the things that made me pick Amanda Hebush playing out, except for the wrestling. I expected to see more of an advantage there, and as usual, what I did not fully take into account, even though I spent a good bit of time on both this show and the Vivi last week, just fawning over what a physical talent Maycee Barber was, I did not fully appreciate how easily she would just be able to muscle Amanda Hebus around. And I think that's why the wrestling advantage I expected did not really reveal itself, and also why Hebus, who was of course very hittable, was just like having long stretches of winning the fight while never ever having a shot of winning any of the rounds. Cause she just kept getting hurt worse. And yeah, as usual, as with Joanna, Valentina, all these other matchups, I just didn't fully appreciate that, like, oh, one of these people is just a fucking horse and the other one is just a person. That was what it looked like to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was also like Dern, Hill. It was...
That's another good one.
It was, yeah, it's the physical attributes. I mean, it would have been fine if they played out in only one area. That this was, once again, a matchup between someone who could punch and someone who couldn't.
Yeah.
Like, Barber is a mess defensively, and still you have to... it's still difficult to say what her game is, apart from in co-ed violence. It's simply sort of better in co-ed violence than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she can crack. That is also something which is, I think, fading out of the women's divisions to some extent. Is the idea that people are going to be able to have sort of relatively even...
Yeah.
People are going to be able to have sort of relatively even matches with each other where they're both sort of pushing shots at one another.
Yeah.
And, even superlative athletes like Claudia Gadelha will be hamstringing themselves because they cannot punch.
Nope. To a great extent, punchers are born rather, or are made. What's the phrase? Born rather than made?
Mm-hmm.
And that is as true for women as it is for men. Some people can just pack a wallop when they throw hands. Maycee Barber, I mean, this has been clear for some time. She's clearly one of these people. She wrecks people when she hits them clean.
Mm-hmm.
The first one of those was one of those strikes we've been seeing defining a lot of her recent fights, too. It was Hebus trying to wrestle her against the fence, and Barber just framing her and just smashing her nose to pieces with an elbow. Any kind of strike that she lands clean, yeah, she is just, and in every phase, just way more powerful than Amanda Hebus. And I think that was the deciding factor more than anything else. She does look, Barber is, I mean, she's clearly getting better in the sort of indefinable way that any professional competitor gets better, right? She looks more experienced. She no longer has to have her ass beaten for 2 rounds before just deciding to go for it. She finds her opportunities a lot earlier. And she looks a lot more comfortable in the pocket. She no longer overreacts so badly when she is herself getting hit. She has correctly understood the best way out of these problems is to start trading with people and scare them off. And that works because she's a monster.
Also, she's more willing to let exchanges go. She has lost.
Yeah.
I mean, and admittedly, this isn't 100% the best trait that you want from your fighter, but it is one of those things where, there were significant amounts of this fight where, Hebus would just be punching Barber in the face several times.
Yeah.
And Barber did not get mad or chase after her or go berserk.
Yeah.
He simply waited for an exchange that she was sure she could win.
Yep.
He just absorbed the damage. Was like, no, I'm sure I will. I'm sure I'll be able to get this back. I'm pretty sure I'm winning this fight.
Exactly. She's just a lot calmer throughout the entire fight where, yeah, she doesn't have to get put into a point of desperation to start finding her shots. She knows it's going to be there. Yeah. So, I mean, that was really it. I mean, I think that the physical difference was far and away the most decisive factor in this fight that, Hebush tied up with her and either got hurt or just got crushed in the scrambles. And in the exchanges, Hebush landed a lot of good shots. You know, she is a very intelligent offensive striker, but she's super hittable on the counter. And anytime one of those counters was found by Barber won the round and ultimately the fight in those moments. Very nice head kick, I will say, to start off the finishing sequence. Barber has always had nice round kicks, and that was one of the best ones I've seen from her. Super clean, good timing. And then just went full berserker mode, chasing Hebush down after she saw that she was rattled. So I liked it. I mean, a very satisfying fight. Barber's not as good as I want her to be, but she is good in the way she needs to be to crush most of her opponents in this division.
I mean, she's just, she's going to be one of those people I think is just generally going to get better. And don't think she's going to be someone where we see like massive Max Holloway, Demetrius Johnson-esque improvements, but you're just going to see someone who's just going to slowly get better at dealing out violence. And we're seeing what her technical base now is, really, and it's just being able to be braced and to throw with power. And as I said, that's not necessarily something which is a given even for the athletes in the division.
No, it didn't even come through for her right away. She used to be much more of a fighter who needed to be tied up, I think, to deliver that bang. And now she keeps her feet planted and she just slings heaters at people in the pocket. Just a much more comfortable and therefore much more effectively violent, superior athlete than she used to be.
Yeah, and now, you know, she's learning. Her defenses are basically, at the moment, is that she's simply learning that she can take shots and that it's okay.
She sees things coming now. I mean, that's clear.
If you've seen them coming, the next step is going to be like doing something about it. Again, I don't expect it to come in quickly.
Yeah,
but I do expect it to come in because she's just got a pretty natural feel for fighting.
Right, and there's nothing, and there isn't going to be anything particularly systematic about her defense. I don't expect. But even in this fight here, you could see in some of these exchanges, she would land her shot and was already looking for what was going to be coming back at her. And a few times successfully sort of rolled with the shot that came back, a few times skated out of range before it could connect. You can see this is the sort of feel for how exchanges go that you expect to see out of fighters as they gain more experience. She's just, nothing Hebush did was particularly surprising her, and that is definitely a good sign. Okay. What about further down on the main card? I think this was the main card opener, unless I'm mistaken. We had Brendan Allen versus Bruno Silva. And this is, my chance to transfer a little ritual that me and, Zane have over on the Vivisection to Heavy Hands. I don't know that you and I have, necessarily, how to put this delicately, filleted Henry Hooft to the extent that...
You know what? That was exactly the word. That was exactly the word I was about to suggest. I was thinking like Zane, Connor, Henry Hooft.
Fellatio.
I was so close to saying that word. I am not joking at all.
Zane, Connor, Fellatio, and Phil is so close. Yeah, Sean Strickland should not listen to this episode. Let's put it that way. Anyway, Zane and I love Henry Hooft. I mean, because we talk about the entire card for every UFC event, and Henry Hooft has honestly, a staggeringly large stable of fighters at this point. Down there at, what is it now? Kill Cliff FC?
Team Evil.
At Team Evil. And, so yeah, we talk about a ton of Henry Hooft fighters. He has a lot of them. And I think Henry Hooft is just very clearly the best striking coach in MMA. He's not even there is no question that he is not a flash in the pan coach. He is more, because Zane and I also love Rafael Cordero. He's one of our other standbys that we love to praise. Somebody who is just very consistent in churning out solid, effective fighters. Henry Hooft is like that, but a better technical coach. Because there are often hiccups. I think he seems results suggest that he is a guy who often strives to rebuild fighters who come to him with bad technique, and you will see them sort of out there stumbling and looking stiff and overthinking until the Henry Hooft striking system has sort of become ingrained. But with
so he's obvious. This probably doesn't need to be said that much. It really works best with people who have a grappling base.
Yeah, turning somebody into a striker who has very little idea of how to strike already. He's great with those fighters.
Also, like, if he builds people from scratch, they tend to not be very good grapplers.
Yeah, true. But a very, very good and consistent striking coach. The rule is always, when evaluating a trainer, to look at their mid-tier fighters, not to look at their super athletes. You don't want to evaluate Dwayne Ludwig's skill as a coach solely by looking at TJ Dillashaw and Chad Mendez, although he obviously did fantastic work with both of those guys. You certainly don't want to look at John Kavanagh with Conor McGregor as a measuring stick and assume that he churns out fantastic fighters. Henry Hooft, at every level of athletic ability, every level of ranking and potential, churns out solid fighters. And Brendan Allen is just a great example of what I think Henry Hooft does super well. Because was this a great striking performance from Brendan Allen? No. Brendan Allen is not a staggeringly good athlete. He is not amazingly fast. He's not amazingly powerful. Although, as his striking technique improves, I think we are going to continue to see more of Brendan Allen delivering effective power as he did in this fight. And he's not, he's just awkward. He's awkward on the feet. He started with an awkward base. But slowly over time, Henry Hooft has been turning Brendan Allen into a more competent striker. And I think we saw that in this fight. Brendan Allen got surprised by a huge punch, more than one huge punch, from Bruno Silva. That's what Bruno Silva does. He is a dyed-in-the-wool brawler. And what did he do? He got backed up to the cage. These were scary moments. You wouldn't say this was like an exhibition of incredible defensive technique, but he calmly weathered these storms from Bruno Silva. He kept his hands up, kept himself in a reasonably safe position, kept his eyes on Bruno Silva, and he chose his moments to fire back with hard planted shots in combination. Uppercut, left hook, right hand, letting Bruno Silva kind of put himself badly enough out of position that he was open for something, and then come tearing back at him with more than one punch. This is a good metric for how comfortable a fighter is on the feet. And I feel pretty confident in saying that had Brendan Allen 2 years ago found himself in the positions that Bruno Silva put him in this fight, he probably would have got KO'd. He would have flinched. He would have panicked. He would have chosen the wrong time to fire back. He wouldn't have been patiently trusting in his ability to not get knocked out so long as he stayed tight and saw the shots coming. Like, that is genuinely a very difficult thing to learn. Surviving those kind of those moments that Robbie Lawler was famous for. Just letting somebody tee off and weathering that storm, maybe still getting hit with shots, but just being calm and defensively sound enough to not get bowled over. That's what Brendan Allen showed in this fight, and I don't think it was something he was showing very much earlier in his career at all. So, another successful Henry Hooft fighter.
The grappling base.
With a grappling base. That's right.
It's important.
Now, before we wrap up, how do you feel about the call out? Brendan Allen, very ballsy. Gets instantly hurt by Bruno Silva. Weathers that storm impressively, comes back, wins by finish, all cool. But given how this fight started, I wasn't sure how to feel about his call out of Jared Cannonier.
Magni-esque.
I respect
how
it.
I would describe it.
I respect it, but as I said on Twitter, he may as well have.
It's like when Neil Magny called out like either Gilbert Burns or Vicente Luque, and you're just like,
Yep.
oh no, baby, what is you doing?
Yeah. You may as well have called out the actual ceiling in the arena you were fighting in. Cause.
Yeah. 100%. How does Brendan Allen win that fight? He is a tough man.
Yeah.
Like, he should be fighting like Anthony Hernandez. That's a great,
That sounds great.
like, fun matchup where you don't really know who would win, but it would be two super gritty guys.
He also
who can fight with pace.
He also called out Drekus, which I think is also a much more winnable fight because Drekus is a fucking mess, and he could get good positions on him on the ground and hit him plenty on the feet. Cannonier, yeah, maybe he can tag him a few times, but the consistency, the output, the cleverness that Cannonier showed in his last fight, and the power of Jared Cannonier, also the fact that he is nigh impossible to out wrestle these days, that doesn't sound good for Brendan Allen.
No, Cannonier would just absolutely kill him.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we agree on that. I hope they don't make it. I like seeing Brendan Allen win. He's a very fun fighter. Seems like a pretty cool guy too, as far as MMA fighters go. I think they should give him Drekus. That sounds fun. Or give him Anthony Hernandez. Both of those sound winnable.
Drekus is either going to be coming off a loss or, fighting for the title after his next fight. So
yeah, he basically
probably
said
not going to be Drekus.
He basically called him out if he loses. In fact, I think that's how he phrased it because he kind of knew. Nice. He seemed to know whoever wins that fight is getting a title shot. So if Drekus loses, give him to Allen. Otherwise, Fluffy Hernandez. Both of those sound like fights that he can win, but which would nonetheless be insanely entertaining and competitive.
Yes, Cannonier would be a slaughter.
Yeah, I don't like that one. Okay, well, I think that'll do it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands.
Wait, one more thing. Like the Neil Magny fight against, was it Philip Rowe?
Yes.
This might be like the Neil Magny fight, and not just in like the way that it's a very archetypal Neil Magny fight, but also in that like that would sort of be the noise you make when you watch it. Philip Rowe really thought he was onto something. Like, it was remarkable seeing like this guy's like mainly known as sort of a one punch at a time power striker and so on. He was just like, man, this guy's easy to clinch up with. So many people before him have.
He's big too. It's like there wasn't even like the usual explanation of like, oh, the reach is so terrifying. And so stressful to deal with that it's like you have to do the MMA fighter thing of getting inside immediately because you just don't like this feeling. He clinched up with him in like 15 seconds.
Yeah. It's just like, I'll show you.
And then he kept clinching. And no wonder, because he had a full-on double underhook body lock for most of that time. Watch a Neil Magny fight, people. Watch one Neil Magny fight. You know what? Going forward, watch this Neil Magny fight. Because this is what happens.
This is the Neil Magny fight.
You dopes.
This is getting a handy.
Oh, absolutely. It's a miracle. Neil Magny is a miracle worker. The number of times he has goaded people into this fight that everyone ultimately loses is, it doesn't make sense.
But he did it instantaneously as well.
Yeah.
It's that like this time, all the people who like posted those memes of him, with the hypnotic swirly background going like, ooh, you want to fall into my clinch? Ooh. Like, maybe that's just right. Maybe you can just do it.
Yeah. He's like the Hypno-Toad from Futurama. We see a very calm, not particularly interesting stare down, at the weigh-ins. What the opponent sees is unignorable command to tie up with Neil Magny.
Can't believe people on the internet waste their fucking time turning like people who have knocked other people out into like Super Saiyans or Thor or Iron Man or whatever.
Yeah.
When what they could be doing is superimposing the effects of Neil Magny sending like clinch hypnotism beams into his opponent's eyes.
Oh, Neil Magny's eyes just glowing red as his opponent. You know, admittedly, the process and why this works so well is once you start, it feels so good to clinch Neil Magny. You're like, I'm winning! And just Neil Magny just knowing that he is in fact winning in a longer way.
Tremendous.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Definitely, Neil Magny at this point. I mean, we should introduce a sort of lifetime achievement category to the handies this year, because truly, no one has suckered people into a completely uncharacteristic game plan that they will ultimately lose more like Michael John. There's people who have like these inescapable patterns, but few of them rely on the opponent just making an unforced error.
Yep.
The way Neil Magny does.
Is the worst brain thinking causer.
Yeah. It's not an unforced error. It is a forced error. It's just that that force is happening in a realm beyond our ken. You know, it's
astral plane.
That's right. He is traveling into his opponent's dreams at night, suggesting over and over, incepting them to tie up with him. All right. Well, glad we brought that up, but that is definitely it. Pretty solid fight night card. Played out, I think, if anything, a little better than it seemed like it might have on paper. Hopefully next week's has a similar level of overperformance in it, because on paper, I don't know. It compels me to wipe my ass with it. I'll say that much.
I mean, it's better than a lot of the other ones we've seen. I'll say that for it. It's got a bunch of entertaining fighters on it.
The main event is the drag, is the problem. It's one of these where there is some stuff to look forward to on the undercard, but God, how are you going to watch this event looking forward to that as the final fight? Who cares?
That is inexplicable.
Inexplicable. Next week, of course, we have a fantastic card, UFC 290, Alex Volkanovski re-defending the featherweight title against Yair Rodriguez, Brandon Moreno having his third, I think, professional fight, or second, I can't remember. One of them happened on The Ultimate Fighter, with Alexandre Pantoja in defense of his flyweight title. We've got Bobby Knuckles versus Dricus du Plessis. We have Jalen Turner versus Dan Hooker. A lot of good stuff is happening on this card, so we will have plenty to talk to. In all likelihood, unless something truly amazing or hilarious happens, we're just going to pretend Strickland Nurmagomedov never happened by the time next week rolls around. So that's something to look forward to. We hope you guys will join us for that. We hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, make sure you find us on Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil at Boxing Bush. That's me. Check us out on Patreon. A couple boxing commentaries coming here at the tail end of the month. We had a big long bonus episode last week for you to enjoy, and we appreciate your support. And until next week, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.